Well, leader can use smart growth because it will introduce the S-curve of learning, which is this simple visual model to understand what growth looks like. And when the leader understands that, then they can introduce these ideas throughout the organization to all of their people. And now you have this common language to understand where they and everyone in the organization is in their growth.
Hello, everyone. This is Marshall Goldsmith. I'm an executive educator who travels all about the world. I do coaching. I've coached lots and lots of wonderful people, and I write books and articles, most of which no one bought, but a few of them a whole lot of people bought. So that's me, and I am here today. We're having a wonderful day. I'm here with a very special person, Whitney Johnson. I love Whitney Johnson. She is a brilliant thinker, a great author, a wonderful consultant, and an even better human being. So Whitney, and she has a new book. Her new book is called Smart Growth. Now she has done and she's also one of the top 10 management thinkers only in this world. Now, Whitney, you're still just competing with people on this planet, but she is one of the top 10 on this planet. So very honored to be here with Whitney. She's just a wonderful human being. Hey, you did a new book. You've done some other great books. So this is not your first great book. You've got another great book here. Let me ask you a question. Why?
You know what? Before we go there, I'm going to disrupt the pattern just a little bit and say you failed to mention one very important accolade, and that is that I had the privilege, I had the honor of being one of the first in the first cohort of 100 coaches. And I still remember, Marshall, where I was when you called me. I was in Cleveland, and you called me and you said, Whitney, you're in. I'm inviting you into 100 coaches. So that is a very important accolade that you failed to omit.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Now I'll tell you why I wrote the book. So I had written a couple of books. I'd written Disrupt Yourself. I'd written Build an A-Team. And these were about personal disruption and how do you use disruption disrupt yourself in order to disrupt as a company, as an entity. And one of the frameworks that I had in the book as we went along was this S-curve of learning. And most of the time it was in the background, kind of this supporting actor. And frequently I would have people say, okay, I get the disruption thing. I understand this mechanism by which I'm going to grow. But talk to me about this S-curve of learning, because it seems like this is a map. It seems like this will help me understand what growth looks like. And when I understand what growth looks like, then I can make progress. And so it was when people kept on calling that out, it was sort of the S-curve is taking a star turn. I thought it's time to really write about this, analyze it in detail, talk to people about this as a mental model for making progress, for being able to grow, whether as an individual or as a company.
Now, two reflections. First, on the concept of disrupt yourself.
Yes.
Yes, Whitney, that very concept has inspired me to sing. Oh, and what is my song? Disrupt yourself. If you don't disrupt yourself, ain't nobody gonna give a good cahoot. Disrupt yourself. So I always like that one because when I hear that term, I always lose into fits of singing.
Now I only see disrupt yourself.
Very
Okay,
good.
do a duet.
And let me give you an example of, I think, what you're talking about. Okay, one of the people that we were just talking about is my friend Albert Berlin. Mm-hmm. Albert, the CEO of Pfizer. And I mean, you talk about somebody who had a big year. I talked to Albert. I said, Albert, how's it going? Well, they did come up with this vaccine for COVID. That's kind of a big thing. And then you got a pill that's going to help people. A new thing for Omicron. I mean, how about the stock? Inc. Employee engagement. Inc. Pride in the company. Inc. CEO of the year. Inc. So I said to Albert, what's your biggest challenge? He said, I have a huge challenge next year. Next year. And I think it's such a healthy concept. Talk about that, because I think it's very related to my book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Mm-hmm. Talk about that S-curve and why you can't it doesn't work straight up like that.
Yeah. Oh, well, first of all, thank you to Pfizer. We're grateful to have vaccines. Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
The S curve of learning is something we were using this. It was first adopted, or I should say popularized by Everett Rogers, the sociologist, to think about how quickly an innovation would be adopted. And we use this at the Disruptive Innovation Fund that I co-founded with Clayton Christensen to think about those innovations and the stocks and the investments that we were making. But one of the big ahas that I had was that the S curve could also help us understand how we learn and how we grow. And so whenever you start something new, you are at the base of the S. And I'm going to show you a picture really quickly so people can know what I'm talking about. Here we go, everybody. See, can you see it? Yes.
Yeah, I can now. Yeah.
When you start something new, you're at the launch point, then you move into the sweet spot, and then in mastery. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. But what this did is it allowed us to think about the emotional arc of growth. When you're at the launch point, growth is going to feel slow, even though it's happening. And that helps you avoid discouragement. And then when you move into the sweet spot, that steep part, there's a lot of growth. It's happening very fast and it feels fast. So it's exhilarating. And then when you reach mastery, because you're no longer enjoying the feel-good effects of learning, you can get bored. And so you need a new challenge. And so by understanding this emotional arc of growth, you have this map to move through any new project that you take on.
Yeah, let me give you another reason I love what you're doing. The world's most widely distributed poem is called the Behavior Gita. And one of the points of the Behavior Gita is you never become too attached to outcomes. And in my new book, The Earned Life, I'm going to talk about our aspiration, which is this higher purpose we have, our ambition, which is the goals and objectives we're trying to achieve, and then finally our actions, our day-to-day enjoyment of the process for life. And to the degree we align those, it's a very positive thing. Now back to the S curve. If people are, and most humans are too focused on the action phase, that's day-to-day life. The people you and I deal with are focused on the ambition phase. They're achieving goals. They're goal achievers. And the problem is, if your whole value is based on achieving goals, what happens after you finish?
Right.
And what happens, for example, is Michael, this is not a secret, Michael Phelps wins the last gold medal in the Olympics, won more than anybody in history. What's his first thought? Kill myself. Why? If your value as a human being is achieving goals and you have to beat next year, you're never going to get there.
Right.
I love Albert. He's not going to do better 2 years from today than today. It's impossible to do better. Well, I think what you're saying is really healthy and restarting life. So I'd like you to talk about that, not from sort of a more businessy perspective, but just a human perspective of life, because I think it's such a healthy way to look at life.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I love about this, Marshall, and I'm now really excited about your book, even more than I was, because one of the things I've been thinking a lot about over the past couple of months is people have been talking about the Great Resignation.
Right.
My thought has been, it's not actually the Great Resignation. What has happened is we were all on this S curve. We were pushed off the S curve. So basically our pre-pandemic S curve. And now we're moving. We've got this momentum and we're looking at our lives and we're saying, I think I want something different. I think I want something more. I think I want to aspire to more, as you just described. And so for me, this is more not the Great Resignation, but in fact, the Great Aspiration. And so to answer your question, what I argue in this book is that growth is our default setting, that when we get to the top of an S curve, which is basically the top of a mountain, in order for us to have a productive, happy life, we need to keep climbing. And the keep climbing might be that we jump to a new curve or we find a way for this to be a summit, not the summit. But our life is an S curve. It's a series of S curves. And when we understand that, when we continue to grow, then we're going to be happy. And I would say to you, Marshall, if you want to come back on camera, I want to say this to you specifically. I think it's fascinating because you got to the top of an S curve and you said, I'm 70 years old. I'm going to retire from coaching and I'm going to be finished. And then you realized, oh, but I kind of love this. And there are other people who want me to do this and I can do it in a different way with different people. So I'm going to keep climbing. And so you yourself discovered that you wanted to keep growing. You didn't want this to be the end. You wanted to continue to make progress.
Thank you. Thank you. And, Bob Dylan has a good quote: "He who is not busy being born is busy dying."
Yeah.
And I think there's so much truth to that. And what I love about this is also that the S curve doesn't necessarily always mean going up. It could be mean going different,
Yes.
in a different direction. And my good friend Beverly Kay wrote, she wrote, "Up is not the only way."
Right.
And sometimes the S curve isn't going up, because when I've done these retiring CEO meetings at my homes with 8 or 9 times, and they're not going to make more money,
Right.
and they're not going to have more power. That's why they're not being CEOs anymore, but they still don't want to play bad golf with old men.
Yeah.
So they want to do something different.
Sorry, delayed reaction on that. Bad golf with old men.
And Whitney, to be honest, today I don't have to be talking to you. You know what I could be doing? I could be playing bad golf with old men at the country club while eating chicken salad sandwiches and discussing gallbladder surgery. Yes, I could be doing. I could be doing that, but I'm not really too interested. So I love what you're doing, and because it's really great for people, to me, at all ages of life. At all ages. And also, I'm going to ask you about the concept of starting over.
Yeah.
Because I think we all need to be able to start over. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So a few thoughts. One of the things I would say is that whenever we reach the top of an S curve, there is this experience that we have of being at the top of the mountain. And we know from mountain climbers that any altitude above 26,000 feet is the death zone. So you're so high up, your brain and your body start to die. Well, when you're at the top of an S curve, the same thing's happening, because you're no longer getting that dopamine. And so you're bored, and your brain and body will literally start to die. And so one of the things that I think is important is when you start to understand that, and you say, I don't want to do something new. What you now know is that if you don't do something new, your brain, your body, your heart, your soul will start to die. And this really leverages loss aversion theory from Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, which is we're more motivated by what we lose than by what we gain. In fact, 2.2 times more. And so if you're saying, I'm not sure I want to start something new, just ask yourself, what will I lose if I don't? I'm going to grow or I'm going to die. And I think I'd rather grow. So I'm going to take the leap and start and try something new. So that's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing is just understand this S curve model, this simple visual, knowing that you know that when you get to that launch point, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be awkward. There's going to be a loss of identity. Who am I if I'm not who I was? But now you know that this is normal. You're supposed to feel awkward and uncomfortable and unsure because you're at the launch point.
That is so true. And, so many people that I've been working with over COVID, I did these programs with 60 unbelievably distinguished leaders about what are you going to do now? And for example, one of the people is Pau Gasol. Pau's a great guy, basketball star for the Lakers, won 2 NBA championships. And he made it to the last Olympics, which I'm very proud of him. He busted his ass, trained really hard, got over a couple of injuries, but it's over. He's 41, had a spectacular career. It's all done. Well, unfortunately, most people in the NBA and even worse in NFL, and Whitney, I think you've met Curtis Martin. What a spectacular guy. He helps ex-football players, disasters. What advice would you have for these mega successful people? The basketball star, the football star, Michael Phelps, the person who is no longer at the top of that game, so that they don't go through this 80% divorced and 60% bankrupt and these hideously bad numbers, and they really start reinventing their lives in a positive way. What advice would you have?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one is that this is about not only this S curve of learning, but personal disruption, which is something that I talk a lot about. And if you've got this matrix, really, your y-axis of success up until Pau retired was he won games. And so one of the things you want to be able to do is say, okay, I've got a different metric now. What metric do I want to measure my life by? And this goes back to Clayton's work, Clayton Christensen, how will you measure your life? Is how am I going to measure my life now? It's not going to be games won. So what will it be? and really disrupt yourself, use different metrics by which you measure yourself. And then recognize that as you do that, you're going to be at that launch point of the curve, and it is going to be uncomfortable. But now that you know that, you can get people around you, you can get coaches, which is what you and I do. And I've learned so much from you on this. You can get coaches, that bonus prefrontal cortex, that are going to help you move up this new S curve, just like you had coaches that helped you move up the S curve as a basketball player or a football player or a baseball player, etc. So that's the advice that I would provide.
Whitney, I think we, you, me, other people in our field, we need to do a better job of coaching people who are like the Olympic people. Sarah Herthland's head of the Olympics, a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. They win that gold medal. And we need to spend more time, not just coaching them to win the gold medal.
Mm-hmm.
There's one of the lines in my book came from my wife, Lyda, and that's after the victory lap.
Oh, I love that.
What happens after the victory lap? Well, everybody's applauding and cheering and jumping up and down. After that victory lap, it's tough. It is very, very tough.
Yeah.
I think what you're doing is really important for people like the people we deal with, which are these mega successful people. On the other hand, I think what you're doing is important for young people to understand. And kind of when I say young, I mean even high school age kids need to understand this.
Agree completely.
Yeah, because I think it would just help them make peace with life a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a couple thoughts, Marshall. Number one is that I really believe and argue, we talk a lot about peak performance, but I believe that peak performance isn't just when you're in the sweet spot. It's the ability to navigate that entire growth cycle. It's the ability to navigate a launch point, to be in that uncomfortable place. It's the ability to move into the sweet spot, this place of optimized tension, and this ability to be in mastery and be very good at something, but then move from that to start something new. And when you understand that growth cycle, when you understand what growth looks like, you increase your capacity to grow, regardless of the arena that you find yourself in. And to your point about young people as well, one of the things that we have found is that when we teach this to individuals in college, even in high school, once they have this map, it makes it so much easier for them to navigate a new semester, to move from high school to college, etc., because now they have this mental model of, oh, I'm at the launch point. I'm supposed to feel comfortable. Oh, I'm in the sweet spot. Oh, yeah, this feels great. Oh, I'm in mastery. I guess it's time for me to graduate. I need to do something new. And so you now have a way to think about where you are and therefore what's next.
Yeah, and you don't become the high school graduate that goes back to the old high school.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't do that. You just can't do that. You've got to move on.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to move on. It's over. Move on to that next level and make peace with that. That's the way life works. A good Buddhist philosophy is every time I take a deep breath, it's a new me.
I love that. That's so beautiful.
It's a new me, and just being able to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And to forgive yourself for what, and also on the not so great side, forgive yourself when you don't win.
Yeah. Oh,
Forgive yourself for being human.
Yeah.
And don't have this drive that, you have to be some perfect person all the time.
Oh, well, I have two thoughts. One, it's interesting. We've been talking a lot about athletes. So one of the people in the book is Zaza Pachulia, who I met. Yeah. And he talked about when he got to the top of an S curve, this place of anchoring, and how it was this place of, it was bittersweet, because on the one hand, he was at the top of the mountain, but there was also a sadness because it was time to retire. And I do think that it is important that we allow ourselves to be in this place of really celebrating what we accomplished, but also experience a little bit of grief. There's this grief and gratitude that comes together. And by being able to mourn the loss of what has ended, then it allows us to have that emotional capacity to move forward as well.
I like that. I like that because basically you're talking to that previous version of you. And rather than judging or critiquing that previous version of you, you're saying thank you to that previous version of you.
That's right.
Whitney, I'm going to wax a little philosophical here. Our good friend Alan Mulally, who's probably one of the greatest leaders of this century, who both of us know and have heard a couple of times. Alan has this process every week where people say, here are my priorities, red, yellow, green. And what it provides is what I call non-judgmental accountability.
Yeah.
People get to be accountable without being judged, which is, I think, really an important concept.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've thought about is, how does that apply to day-to-day life? And I'm going to get back to you, because I think if you look at Whitney's looking at the Whitney score for a week, red, yellow, green. And I think one thing the previous version of Whitney may have done a little too much is, instead of Alan saying, you got a red, it's okay, you're great, it doesn't mean you're a red, it means the score's just a red.
That's right.
I think that previous Whitney may have been a little too critical of saying, what an idiot, how did you get a red, shame on you.
Oh, okay, Marshall, have we talked about this? Now I'm turning red. Okay, this is a great story, Marshall. I have to tell you this story. So I don't know if you remember, but in Build an A-Team, I talked about this. I had interviewed Alan, and I said, Alan, tell me about failure. What do you do when you fail? And he goes, I don't think about it. And I thought, what? So I asked him again. So no, really, tell me, what do you do when you think about failure? And he's like, I don't. And so I finally was like, okay, the third time's a charm. He's going to answer the question. And he said, Whitney, I don't think about it that way. I think of it as information that allows me to get better. And so it was this idea of, oh, this is a resilient person. And what he was saying to me is that when a mistake happens, when failure happens, it's not a referendum on my identity or who I am. It's just information. And so, the reason I asked you that is that there has absolutely been an evolution for me over the past few years, even during the time that you have known me, of really being able to experiment more and take my ego out of the equation, to move up my own S-curve of learning when it comes to being able to forgive myself. So I don't remember if you remember that, but if you didn't, great intuition.
Yeah, I think that's just a wonderful, wonderful example. And again, I think the book is really helpful from a professional point of view, but to me, it's even more helpful from a personal point of view. Because what it really does is help people face the drama of our lives and the fact that things come and they go, and some of us have great years and some of us not so great years. And we're looking at that S-curve in terms of starting over. One thing you mentioned earlier about, what you call the Great Aspiration. I love that phrase, the Great Aspiration. And again, let me give you a thought about this, maybe a somewhat philosophical thought, is COVID put us in touch with something else that we normally don't talk about, death. Death. And I think it really, I'll speak for me and for a lot of other people, caused us to think, what's all this mean anyway? What does all this mean? What am I here for? And when you're looking at people dying and you're reading about death, it does make you think about death. What am I here for? So I think a healthy thing about your book, and I like this phrase, the Great Aspiration, is, to me, it gets people more in touch with that question of, who do I want to become? Who do I want to become, and what am I here for? What are your reflections on that?
Yeah, I have a lot of reflections. I think, yes, absolutely. I mean, what I would say, Marshall, is that if you really try to get me to peel back and say, Whitney, why did you write this book? And you read the epilogue of the book, what you will find is that I have, and this goes to some of my foundational assumptions, that I do believe that we can continue to grow, that this life is about growth, that we will continue to grow after we leave this planet. And so learning how to grow, learning how to develop, learning how to be a keystone species in the ecosystems in which we are, in a way that we give more than we take, because we're looking at, what do we need, but how do we give? So all of those are foundational assumptions for me. And I do think that that has been one of the gifts of COVID, is that we have reflected more and really thought about, what do I want to do? How do I want to give? Who do I want to be? And how am I going to leave this planet better than where I started? I love this quote from Tom Rath, who wrote Strengths Finders and is best-selling Amazon book of all time. He said, contribution is the sum of what grows when you're gone. And I think that's really profound, really profound.
Yeah, I love that. I never heard it, but I love it. Yeah, contribution is the sum of what grows when you are gone. It's a wonderful, wonderful thought. Now, you mentioned our wonderful 100 Coaches group, which is really, to me, been a complete one of these new started for me. I mean, that's something I had no idea would ever happen. It was a restart. You were there from the beginning of this group. You were there, one of the first 25 people. It's more than 100 now, but there were 18,000 applicants. You were one of the first 25 that was selected. And what's been some of your reflections to that about the 100 coaches in terms of people learning and growing?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is the one reflection for me is that you had this idea and then you made it happen. So you had an idea for an S curve and you just made it happen. And I think that to me is very profound. The other thing I would say is that there has been this experience of, how to build community. So you've brought people together and connected people and said, here's what we want to do. Here's the purpose. Here's the vision, and created space for people to get to know each other and then to go be better coaches, to go improve the world, improve the planet. And I look at all the different conversations that I've had and experiences that I've had. So for example, I met Gary Rich because of you and was able to write about him in the prior book. In this particular book, this is actually a real-time example. So this particular book, Smart Growth, because of the accountability groups that you suggested we create, the Life Plan Review, I have been in a group with Harry Kramer and Eric Schoenberg for about a year and a half now.
Yeah.
And as a consequence of that group, they reviewed the book. And Harry at one point said to me, Whitney, I know you're a very spiritual person, but I don't see your values in this book. You called me on it.
Yeah.
And so the version you see now, you will see my values. But it was because you had this idea that you created this community, you created these connections, and now you're giving people the tools and the relationships to go out and make a difference, to do good in the world. And so that's one of the tremendous gifts of this community.
We've got about 3 minutes left. So in our final, one person says, I need to get this book. Annette, you should definitely get it. It's called Smart Growth. Just go to Amazon. I'm assuming, Whitney, it's on Amazon.
Yes, it is.
Go to Amazon. You can order that book. And Annetta, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Whitney, you just got 3 minutes. What are any final reflections you'd like to share in our time together?
Yeah. So one thing I would say is, first of all, I just think about this S curve as a model for what growth looks like, because when you know where you are in your growth, you could increase your capacity to grow. And coming out of the pandemic, psychologists have said periods of tremendous stress can lead to post-traumatic growth. And so you want to grow, you've got this S curve of learning will give you this map of what growth looks like and make it so it's easier to do. And then the second and final thing I would like to say is just thank you, Marshall, for your kindness, for your generosity, for I could make a list of 50 things, and there's probably more, of how you have blessed my life and made many of the S curves I am currently on much more possible. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And, my final comment is, many years ago, I've said I'm going to have honorary kids. And I'm going to be honorary kids. I'm going to adopt these people to be my honorary kids. And I can't say enough about how proud I am of you. And, Whitney, I only have one goal for you in life. And one day you're on a call like this, and you have an honorary son or daughter that's as great as you are. And if that ever happens to you, you had a great experience. So
thank you
very much. Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Bob.
Well, a leader can use smart growth because it will introduce the S curve of learning, which is this simple visual model to understand what growth looks like. And when the leader understands that, then they can introduce these ideas throughout the organization to all of their people. And now you have this common language to understand where they and everyone in the organization is in their growth.